Imagine a world where ancient prophecies, sacred texts, and historical events are more intertwined than you ever imagined. You've heard about ancient civilizations, places like Egypt, Persia, and Babylon, which have captured our collective imagination through time. But what if I told you there's another ancient civilization that has been there all along, quietly hidden within the pages of the Bible? A civilization whose presence was always waiting to be rediscovered. A place known for its gold, spices, elephants, and even majestic peacocks, all symbols deeply rooted in the East. That place, friends, is India. But here's the twist. India has been there all along, just veiled under names and terms that have either been lost in translation or deliberately overlooked. Could the secrets of India's ancient connection to the Bible be the key to unlocking profound truths about prophecy and history? It's easy to think that the Bible only speaks of the civilizations we recognize: Egypt, Babylon, and Persia. Yet, there's something far more fascinating going on beneath the surface. A hidden narrative that goes far beyond the familiar names we read in Sunday school. What if I told you that the land we now call India was not only acknowledged in ancient texts, but that its influence may very well be embedded in some of the oldest prophecies of the Bible? And what if this connection could reshape how we view the history of the world and the destiny of humankind? This is not just a story about a forgotten name, but rather the story of a nation whose significance has been veiled from the mainstream narrative. Now, the question remains, why has no one spoken of this? Why have scholars, preachers, and historians brushed aside any mention of India in their theological discussions? Could this be an intentional omission, or perhaps an oversight by those who shaped the history we know? Because if India's ties to the Bible were acknowledged, it would mean that the story of prophecy and the history of the world have been far more ancient and global than we were ever led to believe. In this journey of discovery, we must go back in time, not just to Jerusalem, but all the way to the fabled lands of Eden, to the ancient heart of Babylon, and beyond, into the distant East. In this exploration, we begin with the land of Or, a place whose treasures were so vast that even King Solomon, one of the most revered figures in biblical history, sent his fleet to acquire its riches. The Bible speaks of Or in 1 Kings 10 verse 11 and 10:22, where we are told of Solomon's grand maritime trade ventures. Solomon, along with Hiram of Tyre, is said to have sent ships to distant lands to bring back valuable cargo. These shipments included gold, silver, ivory, apes, and peacocks, among other rare commodities. At first glance, this may seem like just another tale of ancient trade. But let's pause for a moment and consider the significance of these items. Gold and silver? Sure, those are expected treasures. But apes and peacocks? These are animals native to South Asia, not the Mediterranean region where Solomon's kingdom was situated. Add to this the spices, gems, and aromatic woods that were staples of ancient Indian trade, and we begin to see something curious emerging. As we dive deeper into this mystery, we find that the name Ogar does not seem to have any direct origins in the Semitic languages spoken in the biblical world. Yet, some scholars have made a fascinating connection. Could OIR be derived from the Sanskrit word Sapara? Sapara was an ancient seaport located along the western coast of India, near present-day Sapara in Maharashtra. Is this just a coincidence, or could it point to an ancient link between India and the Bible that has been hidden for centuries? In the 16th century, Portuguese missionaries, upon arriving in southern India, were astounded to find thriving Jewish communities still existing there, communities that claim to have descended from Jews who arrived in India long before the time of Christ. Some of these missionaries even speculated that the ancient seaport of Saqqara might be the same Or described in the Bible. Jewish historian Josephus, a notable figure of the 1st century, documented the long voyages taken by Solomon's fleet, with some journeys lasting up to 3 years. This time frame aligns perfectly with the maritime distances between Israel and the Malabar coast of India, especially when considering the seasonal monsoons that would affect such long sea voyages. Further supporting this theory, modern-day archaeologists have uncovered fascinating evidence. Roman coins have been found in the Kerala region of India, as well as Babylonian seals and even Phoenician trade routes that stretched all the way to Sri Lanka. The Phoenicians, known for their mastery of seafaring, managed to reach these distant shores. So, why couldn't Solomon's fleet have done the same? What's even more intriguing is that the Bible does not describe Or as a nearby, easily accessible place. It speaks of it as far, exotic, and dangerous, a place worth risking years at sea to reach. It's a place that had something no one else did. So, why isn't this commonly discussed? Why do most biblical readers assume Or is a mythical land, or at best, a location somewhere in East Africa? The answer may be as simple as this. Once we accept that Solomon traded with India, we open the door to a whole new understanding of Israel's ancient economic and spiritual connections. If Solomon had ties with India, it suggests that the ancient Israelites were not confined to their immediate surroundings, but had knowledge of and interactions with a far more globalized world than previously understood. And if India was part of the biblical world, if Solomon's reign extended across the seas to the east, what other hidden prophecies and revelations might be waiting to be uncovered in ancient texts? Could the name Ojar have been more than just a location? It could have been the key to understanding a deeper spiritual narrative that's been right under our noses this entire time. But the trail doesn't stop here, because one of the greatest prophets of Israel, Isaiah, may have had a vision about India long before anyone dared to speak its name. The words of the prophet Isaiah are some of the most significant in the Bible, and they have echoed through the ages. Isaiah's prophecies speak of a coming restoration, a time of redemption. But there's a hidden message buried within his words, one that many have never truly examined. In Isaiah 66, verse 19, we read of a mysterious prophecy, "And I will set a sign among them, and I will send those that escape of them unto the nations, to Tarsus, Pul, and Lud, that draw the bow, to Tubal and Javan, to the isles afar off, that have not heard my fame, neither have seen my glory." Isaiah speaks of nations afar off, places that have not heard of Israel's God. But who are these nations, and where are they located? For ancient Israelites, Tarsus was often viewed as the edge of the known world, possibly referring to a region in Spain. Lud and Pul have stumped scholars for centuries. Some have suggested they refer to Lydia in Asia Minor. But what if they represent something further east, beyond Persia and deep into the heart of the Indian subcontinent? Let's take a step back and examine the context of this prophecy. Isaiah's time was one of constant interaction with Egypt, Assyria, and Babylon. But to the far east, there was a vast land, India, that remained untouched, unknown to the people of Israel. But ancient trade routes, such as the Silk Road and the sea routes connecting Israel to the east, bring a new perspective to this prophecy. Phoenician ships, Persian caravans, and Roman merchants reached as far as India's Malabar coast. Given these trade networks, is it really so hard to believe that the prophets foresaw India in their visions? Let's take a look at old maps from the medieval and early modern periods, and you'll find curious annotations on the Indian coastline. Maps from as early as 1595 labeled parts of South India with terms like paradise and even referred to regions as Tharsis Orientalis. Could this be a clue, a rediscovered prophecy about India, or just a coincidence? The evidence is compelling, but still, much of the world remains oblivious to this connection. In the context of Isaiah's prophecy, India seems to fit the description of a nation afar off more than any other place on earth. Isaiah's vision wasn't just about the future of Israel. It was about global redemption. And if India is indeed part of that redemption, then it holds an important role in the fulfillment of prophecy. If these ancient connections are true, then perhaps the Bible's narrative is far more expansive and far-reaching than we were ever told. The story of Thomas the Apostle's journey to India is one preserved in the ancient writings of early Eastern Christians, many of whom spread this narrative throughout the ancient world. These accounts tell of Thomas's divine calling to travel to India, where he would not only preach the gospel, but also heal the sick and establish churches in far-flung regions, most notably in the southern coastal area of Malabar. Along his journey, he encountered Jewish communities, Hindu scholars, and welcoming villagers, all of whom, according to the accounts, embraced the message of the risen Messiah. For nearly 2,000 years, this story has been cherished by local traditions in Kerala, where the community of Martoma, also known as the St. Thomas Christians, continues to claim direct descent from the churches Thomas himself founded. This tradition isn't just a piece of oral folklore. In Mayapur, near modern-day Chennai, lies a site believed to be the burial place of Thomas. Inscriptions in ancient Syriac and a stone cross mark the location, and accounts from early Portuguese explorers strongly suggest that this is indeed the place where Thomas's earthly remains rest. When Vasco da Gama and other Portuguese explorers arrived in India in the late 15th century, they were shocked to find well-established Christian communities already thriving, long before Europe fully embraced Christianity. One Portuguese priest famously wrote, "We came to bring the gospel only to find it had been here before us." Moreover, the records from ancient copper plates and palm leaf manuscripts, carefully preserved by Indian Christians, reveal royal grants, religious freedom, and alliances with local kings. These documents provide concrete proof that Christianity had deep roots in India long before European missionaries arrived. Yet, despite all this evidence, this chapter of church history is often overlooked or ignored in the Western narrative. Why? Because it challenges the accepted timeline of Christianity's spread. It reveals that Christianity didn't merely spread from Europe to the rest of the world. It had already reached the East long before the West had fully acknowledged Christendom. If Thomas truly reached India, then the country wasn't just mentioned in prophecy, it had already been part of the grand story from the very beginning. It was no mere footnote. It was a frontier in the ancient world, one that had a crucial role to play. But Thomas wasn't alone in his journey. Long before global empires rose to prominence, India had already established itself as a cornerstone of trade, with its spices, silk, incense, and precious goods making their way into the pages of the Bible. What does this tell us about India's hidden connection to the end times? Let's take a deeper dive. In the final book of the Bible, Revelation, we encounter vivid visions of the world's final days, filled with powerful symbols, beasts, angels, and empires falling from grace. But nestled in the 18th chapter of Revelation is a trade list that isn't just spiritual in nature. It also reveals a very tangible economic reality, one that paints a picture of commerce stretching across the ancient world. The merchants of the earth will weep and mourn. The passage says, "For no man buys their merchandise anymore." What follows is a detailed list of luxury goods: gold, silver, precious stones, fine linen, silk, scarlet, all fine wood, all manner vessels of ivory, and all manner vessels of most precious wood, cinnamon, incense, myrrh, frankincense, wine, oil, fine flour, wheat, beasts, sheep, horses, chariots, and slaves. Revelation 18 verses 11 to 13. These goods aren't just random items. They're items that were part of the active trade between East and West, and many of them were products uniquely tied to India's trade routes. Silk, spices, ivory, aromatic wood, cinnamon, and frankincense. These aren't merely symbolic. They were the prized commodities that traveled along the ancient Silk Road and maritime spice routes, connecting India with Arabia, Persia, and the Mediterranean world. India was the beating heart of this vast trade network. The subcontinent produced silk and imported it from China, while it also exported cinnamon, spikenard, and fragrant woods from its southern forests. Ivory from elephants, precious gems, fine cotton, and even peacocks. These products were not only the height of luxury, but also symbols of divine wealth in the ancient world. Even the fabled city of Babylon, often seen as the emblem of world corruption in the Bible, was intricately tied to this trade system. Babylon relied heavily on the goods that flowed from the east through Persia, the Arabian Gulf, and ports like Saqqara and Maziris along India's western coast. So, when Revelation warns of the collapse of Babylon the Great, it's not simply a warning about one city or one empire. It's a vivid portrayal of a global economic system, one built on the exploitation of goods, people, and resources from the East, especially India. In today's world, we still see the echoes of this ancient trade system. A modern Babylon continues to rise, thriving on the same commodities, spices, textiles, technology, and even human labor that have been central to India's economic legacy. And herein lies an uncomfortable truth. If the book of Revelation contains such a detailed list of items that are uniquely tied to India, then India is not just a passive observer in biblical prophecy. It is an active participant in the prophetic economy, both in the past, in the present, and perhaps even in the future. But India's role in prophecy may not only be economic. What if the Bible's prophets were not just aware of the goods that flowed from the East, but also foresaw a spiritual force rising from that same direction, one that would challenge the established order in the final days? For centuries, scholars have looked to the West, Rome, Jerusalem, Europe, and America, when searching for signs of prophecy. But the Bible never said the story would end where it began. In fact, it hints at something far more unexpected, of a rising force from the East. In the book of Daniel, while in exile in Babylon, the prophet records a cryptic detail in Daniel 11 verse 44, "But tidings out of the east and out of the north shall trouble him." This refers to a great ruler, often interpreted as the Antichrist or a future king of global power. His dominance is disrupted not by military conquest, but by news from the east. What kind of news could cause such disruption? Then, in Isaiah 41 verse 2, we find another clue. "Who raised up one from the east whom righteousness calls to his feet." Isaiah speaks of a mysterious figure from the east, one raised up by God, empowered by righteousness, and destined to challenge the established order. Some have speculated that this refers to Cyrus the Great of Persia, but others believe this prophecy points to a broader pattern. Could it be that from the East, disruption and divine awakening are meant to come? Today, the East is once again rising, not only economically, but spiritually. Millions of people are turning away from materialism in search of deeper meaning and spiritual fulfillment. India, a land known for its ancient mysticism, meditative traditions, and spiritual hunger, stand at the center of this global shift. Could India's ancient soul be stirring once more, not to reclaim an empire, but to emerge as a vital voice in the end-time conversation? In the pages of Revelation, the East is tied not only to the fall of Babylon, but also to the final movement of kings across the Euphrates in the last days. But what if this isn't just about armies? What if it's about a spiritual realignment, one that originates in the very lands long dismissed by Western theology? From the spices of Kerala to the scrolls of Isaiah, from Solomon's ships to Thomas's footsteps, the East has always been present, quietly watching, waiting. And now, as the world faces uncertainty, the East may be rising, not to conquer, but to awaken. So if India has always been part of the story, woven into the tapestry of Scripture from the beginning, through prophecy, trade, and mission, then perhaps, just perhaps, it will also stand at the end as the nation that was hidden in plain sight all along. Now, the question is yours to answer. Do you believe India has a prophetic role to play? Do you think its significance will be revealed as the final chapters of history unfold? Share your thoughts below. If this exploration has shifted the way you see the Bible's grand narrative, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and share this revelation with others. Because the story isn't over yet, and the last pages of history may very well be written in the ink of India's untold influence.